Hello and welcome to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. This week, our guest is author and former advisor to presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg, Lis Smith. Remember, we love taking your questions, so write in at politicswarroom@gmail.com or send a tweet to @Politicon for next week's show. We'll get to as many as we can, and don't forget to tell us where you're from. Please check out the links to this week's sponsors, Miracle Brand, Raycon, and Real Paper in the show notes. We thank you for supporting our sponsors. It helps make this podcast happen. Please tell your friends about us and remind them to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Hey, James, you know, there are important elections in August, primaries in Wisconsin, Arizona, the challenge to Liz Cheney in Wyoming. But in the top tier is Kansas, which on August the 2nd, less than 2 weeks from now, will vote on abortion, specifically whether to end the state's constitutional protection for abortion. It's the first electoral test since the Supreme Court's decision overturning abortion protections. And even though Republicans stack the deck and far outnumber Democrats in that state, it seems like it's very close. 538 released a poll showing that the anti-abortionists hold a slim 47 to 33% lead, but Democrats are more energized than Republicans. Now, you know, this is a really good test for pro-choice advocates. So to go to Kansas, send money to Kansas, volunteer, help the Kansans for constitutional freedom at the phone banks. James, if Kansas, that's Kansas, Dorothy, if Kansas votes pro-choice, it will be a signal heard around the political world this year.
Well, I think, and I'm trying to think, I think like Scott Brown or Harris Wofford, but you know, most important non-election day election that I can remember. And I maybe you can think of something else, but this is as important as one. Let me, because there's some more context to this. The Kansas Supreme Court held that the right was enshrined in the Kansas Constitution. And that was, I think it was 2019. So the Kansas legislature, the supermajority of Republicans, they put it on a ballot. But even more importantly, it was supposed to be on the ballot in November. They're putting it on the ballot August 2nd, which is not even 2 weeks away. Understand this. In Kansas, there's a Democratic governor. Well, there's not going to be a primary. All right, August 2nd is primary day. There are literally, I don't know, hundreds of Republican primaries all through Kansas, because in most places, you win the election by winning the primary. And they had polled it and found out that they would lose if they had a general election electorate. And so they was really sneaky. They rushed it on the ballot to put it where all these candidates would be getting Republican voters out. It appears that, I think the story is being undercovered. There's some national coverage. There should be 1,000 times more, given its importance. And if, in fact, the no side, which is the side that doesn't want a constitutional amendment, if they win, that's going to be really significant. It's going to tell you a lot about enthusiasm, tell you a lot about turnout, and it's going to demoralize Republican voters. They're going to get demoralized something awful Thursday night. I mean, I think that's one of the real benefits of this January 6th.
The January 6th hearings.
Right. Yes. It's tomorrow night. Whatever you do, don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'm telling you, don't miss it. But this is, the ramifications of this are really stunning. And the possibility, and you're exactly right, send money, you know, if you can figure out how to call people in Kansas, a phone bank, and I am high on targeting. It's one political thing to remember about the choice issue is no difference in females view a choice based on education, race, or anything else. But target non-college females. The people in Lawrence, in you know, Johnson County, Olathe, they all know what they're doing. All right, they're coming out and vote. It's you need the waitress at the truck stop in Salina to come out. This is an election where you're going to get Mabel to vote. Mabel votes, we're going to be good.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to say to all those people who are picketing Brett Kavanaugh's house or the Supreme Court, it's the first thing, that's a constitutional right. It doesn't do any good. It's probably counterproductive. Don't pretend you were handcuffed when you were not. Go out to Kansas if you can. If you can't go out to Kansas, send money. If you can't do that, try to help them with the phone banks out there. That's what will make a difference. Kansas.
The squad, don't go to
James,
Kansas. Don't go to Kansas. Okay, they don't want you. They don't need you. Just stay right. Go ahead and do fake handcuffs if that's what you got to do. To get attention is because we have this politics is a performance art. But yes, ordinary, people go to Kansas. This just gives me how useless progressive Washington is. I mean, we had Ryan Grimmer.
James, we're going to give them a chance to get back in your good graces if they'll go to Kansas or do something. They have a chance. That's going to be hard.
No, AOC, Rashida, don't go to Kansas. Stay in Washington. You're fine right there.
Listen, Kansas is one of a minority of states before this ballot initiative on the 2nd of August that's not really affected by the court stops decisions. Out there, abortions remain legal up to 22 weeks. That's the viability standard. There are few restrictions like a 24-hour waiting period. But states around it are going to go and they're going to ban abortions. And if Kansas elects a Republican governor in November, there is a good chance the legislature and the governor next year could ban abortions totally in Kansas. So there really is a great deal at stake. And August the 2nd. James, one thing let me just say about watching those hearings. That January 6th hearings will be tonight, Thursday night. So be sure and tune in. James is absolutely right.
So yes, and remember this: maybe 80% of the people live in eastern Kansas. Which Missouri. You're going to go to Missouri? I don't think so. You're going to go to Arkansas? I don't think so. You're going to go to Oklahoma? I don't think so. Even Nebraska? I don't think so. I mean, it's going to be, if this thing passes, it'll be what they refer to as an abortion desert in the middle of the country. So it's really, I mean, the more that you think about this, the bigger it is. This is a huge, huge, profoundly critical and important election. And by the way, I'm going Sunday. I'm going to try to get on our Sunday call from the airplane, but there's no way. Wild horses couldn't keep me out of Kansas.
When James Carville goes to Kansas, it is big. August 2nd, Kansas, right? It will be, it'll have huge reverberations, and people, instead of protesting and picketing, get involved with Kansas. James, another big issue is big stuff is happening down in Georgia. The Fulton County DA, as a grand jury and a criminal investigation of Donald Trump, subpoenaed big shots nationally like Rudy Giuliani and Lindsey Graham, and also top Georgia Republicans. This could be the biggest deal yet on Trump, or at least the first big deal on Trump. And I think that it's clear Republicans are scared by this. I don't know this woman, Fani Willis, but she seems to be quite tough. She's brought in an outside expert who is the expert on the RICO, the racketeering statutes. I mean, I'll tell you, if I were the Donald and some of his allies, I would be quite nervous about what's going on in Fulton County.
I have been on this whole RICO, and I hope that next week we're hopeful that we'll have an authority on the Georgia RICO statute. The thing about Fani Willis that has not been, maybe it's been noted, but it hasn't been noted near enough. She supervised the most complex criminal case in the history of the United States, and that was the Atlanta schools case, where there were multiple instances of schools or teachers and altering tests to make them look better. And it was a very, very, very complicated, wide-ranging prosecution that was successful. So this, don't kid yourself. This is a person who didn't just fall off the turnip truck. This is a person who is very skilled at putting together a team to deal with very complicated litigation. And more importantly, very complicated criminal litigation. So there's just some other things that you have. What we believe, we'll find out for sure, hopefully next week. Georgia has an overly aggressive RICO statute, and it's being pursued by anybody's measure, a highly competent and experienced prosecutor, and who has brought in, I'm told, some really top people,
including the foremost expert on racketeering. So that's certainly a sign. And I think there's great nervousness. Lindsey Graham, who first said, I ain't showing up for any subpoena, has changed his mind. You'll remember it was Senator Graham from the state of South Carolina who called the Secretary of State in Georgia to basically inquire about whether they could do something about that vote tally that was coming in that wasn't going Trump's way. And I imagine Georgia Republicans must be just apoplectic, James, because she subpoenaed, I believe, both the lieutenant gubernatorial candidate in Georgia and the state party chair, former state party chair.
Yes. And the lieutenant governor candidate does not get along well at all with the governor. They have almost a non-existent relationship, I'm told, because, Trump did everything he could to try to beat the governor. And the guy is very Trumpian. And this is something that can help a little bit on the margins, is the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor in Georgia. And the lieutenant governor has a little more power than most places. He's kind of the president of the Senate there. And he can appoint committees. Of course, it's going to be a Republican legislature. But it's more than just a place where you just wait for the governor to die. And there's a guy named Charlie Bailey, who's a good friend of mine, who is a very, very experienced, who worked for Fannie Willis in the Fulton County's DA office. And very strong on crime and prosecution. And I think that he and Stacey can run, as a team. And, public safety is a huge issue in Georgia. And she can point to the fact that she has Charlie on the ticket, and it's a good kind of yin and yang. So, yes, it's something I think they should accentuate because Brian Kemp and the lieutenant governor can't stand each other. Now, people are going to really vote on the lieutenant governor. Yeah, no, but atmospherically, and, when you're down to fighting for every vote and every perception, it could help. It could help.
Yeah. It sure could. One of the issues, the federal protocol says basically that in the a couple months before the election, you don't hand down an indictment that has political ramifications. That's not a law or a rule, but it's been follows protocol. I don't know what the case is in Georgia, but she gave an interview the other day where she basically said, "Don't rule out indictments this fall." So we'll see, but it's a big story.
I think I read a story this morning too, where Attorney General Merrick Garland has endorsed that Justice Department policy.
Yeah, he got criticized by some lefties, but that's a long-standing policy. That's not a Merrick Garland policy.
They just, these people just run their mouths for the sake of running their mouths. They think they're going to get more online.
I ignited the James Carville passions again about the lefties. Okay, so watch Kansas and watch Georgia. A warm weather is here. That is an understatement. For us, that means hot, sleepless nights. But we recently found a great way to stay cool at night so you don't wake up all sweaty and sticky, since we started using Miracle brand self-cooling bed sheets. Stay comfortable every night. And with silver-infused fabrics originally developed by NASA, Miracle brand sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long. Its unique self-cooling properties ensure you get better sleep every night. Even better, they're self-cleaning thanks to their infusion of natural silver that prevents 99.9% of bacterial growth. They stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets, so forget those gross odors. Miracle sheets are also luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. The sheets use a premium 500 thread count sateen weave that's made with USA-grown Supima cotton, one of the highest quality cottons in the world. Plus, they're better for your skin, so stop sleeping on bacteria with Miracle brand sheets. There's less bacteria to clog your pores, which means fewer breakouts and other skin problems. It's great for the summer heat, right, James?
It's so good. And if you stop and you think about it, if you're lucky, you spend 1/3 of your life in beds, hopefully sleeping. And of course, you spend more time sleeping than you do driving. You would want to have a comfortable car. Well, have a comfortable thing, and there's research. There's overwhelming research that shows you that there's certain temperatures that people sleep better. It tends to be a little bit colder. If you live in the climate that I live in, there's nothing. You got that air conditioner going highballing at night, and these things are going to help you sleep better, sleep longer. And I don't know about anybody else that listens to this show, but I can tell you the most determinative event on how I feel on a given day is how well I slept the night before. I woke up this morning and I looked at my cell phone and it was like 4:21, and I went, "Oh my God!" And then I don't know what happened. I blacked out again, and it was 8:21. I can't tell you what that 4 hours did for me today. Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah. What a difference.
Boy, and it really makes a difference. We came back yesterday from Idaho, and I got to tell you, wasn't hardship duty. It was a wonderful writers' conference in Sun Valley, but that trip out there, that 5-hour trip back or 6-hour trip, you really need great sheets and a great sleep. So go to trymiracle.com/war room or try them today. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Be sure to use our promo code War Room at checkout to save 40% off. 40% off and get 3 free towels. That's 3 free towels. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. So upgrade your sleep with Miracle Brand. Go to trymiracle.com/war room. That's trymiracle.com/war room and use the code War Room to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save 40% off again. That is trymiracle.com/war room or look for the link in our show notes. Thank you, Miracle Brand, for sponsoring this episode. Hey, James, Lis Smith is a longtime political strategist, and she's written a book about her experiences. She joins us. Liz, tell us what you wanted to achieve in any given Tuesday, a political love story.
Well, I wanted to tell the truth about what it's like behind politics. I decided that I wanted to do politics when I was 10 years old, and I saw the War Room starring one James Carville, and I fell in love with the excitement of it, but also the magnitude of politics back then. And when I was watching that movie, I noticed it was a very male movie. There's a lot of James, a lot of George Stephanopoulos. You didn't see a lot of women in leadership positions there. And so with my book, one thing that I wanted to do was to write, this is what it's like behind the scenes, but this is also what it's like behind the scenes for a woman. And it's really important, I think, to get more women involved in politics, especially when you see these things like the Dobbs decision coming down. And the way that we get more people into politics, I think, is pulling back the curtain a little bit and demystifying the process.
You were a press flag for many politicians, many who succeeded. Tell me how do you define success? There was one anecdote that you said that MSNBC's Katie Tur was repeating verbatim the line that you had fed her. Is that the gold standard?
No, that isn't the gold standard. I mean, part of the job, I think, when you are, on the flack side, is that you do pass along information to reporters. No, but I think the gold standard is where you can work well with the candidate to break through with voters, and obviously win an election.
We hear the word spin a lot. Ben Bradley, one of the great newspaper editors of all times, maybe the greatest, used to say that spin is just a nice word for lying. Tell us the difference.
No, we use the term spin pretty casually in politics. It can be anything from a conversation just about a press release you put out to sort of, I guess, putting lipstick on a pig. And I don't think that spin counts as lying. There's lying counts as lying. Spinning is about making the best argument that you can for your candidate and for your cause and for the message that you're putting out.
James.
So by the way, I'm taking you and Maggie Haven, Manny Grunwald. We're going to go to dinner in Manhattan, and we can talk about women in politics and campaigns and journalism, because I'm obviously a huge fan, particularly I've said about the war room. So last week we had Tim Miller, and we talked about the addictive nature of politics. I call it the smell of cordite. It's referred to it, I think, in Apocalypse Now as the sweet smell of napalm in the morning. All right, and you obviously. You've taken a needle, all right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you were drawn to this early, and you had what you write about, an experience with Andrew Cuomo.
Mm-hmm.
And you think the Klieg lights got to you a little bit there, or looking in retrospect, how do you fit into that?
Sure. So I listened to your podcast with Tim, and I read his book, which is fantastic, because he does pull back the veil and he talks about the game aspect of politics, right? That you're
Right.
sort of addicted to the adrenaline of it. In my case, and look, I'm not going to lie, I do enjoy the ups and downs of it. It is an exciting business. There's never a dull day. But for me, my weakness sometimes is I think there are two parts to it. Loyalty is a big part of politics, right? Campaigns become families, and you develop extreme loyalty toward the people you work for, to an extent that you don't maybe ask rational, reasonable questions that you should in the time you have with them. I also had another situation in my life, which was that I had been the subject of a number of tabloid stories in the past over my relationship and over one of my private relationships. And I had lost my job for it with incoming Mayor Bill de Blasio. And the way I felt going through that, seeing a lot of the cut and run people run away from me, the people who were there for me one day suddenly weren't, or was really tough to see. And I was determined not to let someone else go through that process again. But what I learned sort of sitting down, writing all of this is that there's a difference between earned loyalty and blind loyalty. And no one should ever conflate blind loyalty with integrity, as I think I did at some points in there. And it was important for me, if I'm going to be honest about other people in this book and mistakes they made, for me to be honest about myself and the mistakes that I made.
So, are you 40 yet, by the way? Just to ask a personal question.
I'm 39 years old.
You're 39 years old.
Yes.
Okay. Same age as my wife. Never mind. So you've been mentored by David Axelrod and Obama campaign. You have worked at 40 years old. You might be the most impressive political resume I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. I mean, you were Pete Buttigieg's communications director. You were Terry McAuliffe's press secretary. You were Andrew Cuomo's lead consultant. I could go on and on and on and on. And that by the way, that's a pretty good career at age 40. I don't very few have sort of matched that. And you're also working for one of the favorite people of this show, and that's Senator Mallory McMurrow, who mm-hmm. we saw you with in Indianapolis.
Yep.
There's a big referendum in Michigan on abortion, and apparently it's generated a lot of volunteers and a lot of grassroots activity that we were looking to see if we would see this post-Dobbs. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Michigan just with that referendum for a moment.
So in Michigan, there is a law on the books from 1931 that would criminalize the act of abortion. So what pro-choice activists are trying to do in Michigan is to bring it up for a vote and to strike it down. And it has galvanized a lot of the people that we saw, come out in the 2018 midterms, in 2020, and especially a lot of women in Michigan, because now with Roe falling, people are seeing the stakes of these elections, that elections matter. And while it polls the same, abortion and choice poll the same among men and women, there's no doubt that women feel this issue more viscerally, because essentially politicians are saying that they have the right to make our healthcare choices for us. And Michigan is going to be a really critical state in this upcoming year. And it's one of those states where all the top Republican gubernatorial nominees are election deniers, and are people that we cannot trust in 2024 to validate any election for a Democrat. So it's really, really, really important that we appeal to the not only to the base, but to a lot of the swing voters who might otherwise have gone with Republicans to turn out for Democrats and to turn out to overturn that 1931 law.
Albert?
You've worked for a lot of politicians, as James says. Some, Tom Daschle, Terry McAuliffe, Pete Buttigieg, I would say, and certainly Senator McMurrow now, are really quite admirable. Some, Andrew Cuomo, Eliot Spitzer, not so much. How do you choose who you're going to work for? How much of it has to do with electability? How much has to do with policy positions? How much character? And how do you assess character?
That's a good question. Someone was asking me about that yesterday. And so two things that I would say is, one, I don't always get my assessments right, as I write about in the book. In terms of, with the people who I've worked for, who are people of great integrity, great character, great, who turn into being good candidates, the things that you look for in them, and that I would encourage more people to look for, are, do they fit the values of the voters? Yes, that's obviously an important thing. Can they raise the resources to win? Do they have a path to victory? But to try to see into them a little bit more, which is hard to do when you're interviewing. But the candidates that you mentioned, people like Terry McAuliffe, people like Pete Buttigieg, people like Mallory McMorrow, they are all people who are very comfortable in their own skin, which is very important, because they're not just running around putting their fingers in the wind, and using that to determine where they stand on issues. But they're also people of great humility. And I understand that politics is not you don't necessarily associate politics with humility. Most people associate it, I would say, with narcissism. But you do want to look for sort of that in people that you're going to work for. Another important thing I always encourage people to do is to talk to people who've worked for someone before, to get a sense of what they're like behind the scenes. Because as you guys know, someone can be amazing in front of a camera, but a complete nightmare behind the scenes.
Okay, Joe Biden says he's not going to run, and he announces in January of 2023. What's your dream job in the next presidential cycle? Senator McMurrow, Secretary Buttigieg, or someone else?
Well, one, I think Joe Biden is going to run.
No, you don't really. You really don't think that.
You know what? I do. I've heard no indications that he's
not going to.
This is
called spin, Liz. This is spin.
Okay, from anyone close to the president, have you heard that he is not going to run for re-election?
No, is that a surprise to anyone?
Okay, and
I'm waiting for someone to say, you know what, this joker just ain't going next time. He's too old.
And we also, I think, to some extent, I can't say I know Joe Biden super well on a personal level, but I know that I know some of his personality traits, and one of them is that he's a stubborn guy. He's a prideful guy, and so I have a really hard time seeing him not running for re-election. And I would also just say, in 2010, before I worked for Barack Obama, we saw this similar hand-wringing about Barack Obama. Should he be replaced by Hillary Clinton? The party got shellacked in 2010. Do we need to be looking to other alternatives? So I think some of this is history repeating itself. So I'm going to reject the premise of the 2024 question, but for the future, I do think that the Democratic Party has a great bench, and we should be looking to new faces outside of Washington, D.C. And we did see that there was a hunger for that during the 2020 primaries, when people did gravitate toward Pete, who was a very unconventional candidate, 37 years old, mayor of South Bend. And we've got a tremendous bench out there, but we've got to start elevating them as a party. And I think the Republican Party sometimes does a better job of doing that.
All right, James Carville.
So, what's your professional opinion on something? I'd say 80% of my conversation about politics over the last 3 weeks are about decoupling. That people they see these polls and they call me and says, "God damn! If I look internally, I think we'd get the shit beat out of us, and yet we're 3 points up in the head-to-head." And that the law of political physics has continually dictated that in an off year, the end party's success is tied to presidential approval, which is obviously in the crapper right now. Are you seeing this decoupling, and can you have anything you want to add to this conversation, or what you think might be behind it, or are we just going to revert to the law of political physics and get the crap beat out of us in November?
Well, it is bizarre. If you look at, even the polling from yesterday, you saw Biden at 33, but on the generic ballot, Democrats, I think, narrowly leading Republicans, which suggests that this year we could sort of defy political gravity. And we've had a lot of weird election cycles recently. When Joe Biden won in 2020, Republicans picked up seats in the House. You would have thought that, Democrats would have picked up seats in the House that year as well. So it's very unpredictable. But I think there is something behind it, which is there's a choice in a lot of these elections. There's a choice in these House races. There's a choice in these gubernatorial races. There's a choice in the Senate races. And the Republicans are nominating the most extreme candidates you can imagine, completely crazy for cuckoos. They are Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. It could be Carrie Lake in Arizona, Tudor Dixon in Michigan. These are all people who denied the 2020 election results, don't believe in abortion under any circumstances, whether a woman is victim of rape, incest, or her life is at stake. And there's that old saying Joe Biden used to always cite on the campaign trail, certainly not the first, which is that we're running against the alternative, not the almighty. And the alternative is pretty scary and unattractive to people. One other thing I would say is in 2021, we did see a lot of Biden voters flip to go with Youngkin. And that, frankly, scared the bejesus out of me for the midterms. But there's a big difference between Glenn Youngkin and Doug Mastriano, right? And I have a hard time seeing Joe Biden voters crossing over to vote for Mastriano, or even sitting on their hands and saying this guy is fine, just because of how truly, truly outside the mainstream all of these Republican nominees are.
So you think it's candidate-driven in a lot of instances?
Yeah.
On the Republican side.
Yeah, well, I think right now that's part of the issue here and why we're seeing some of this decoupling. It could be wishful thinking on my part, but in 2012, when I was working for Barack Obama, I remember hanging Todd Aiken and Richard Murdoch around the neck of, every Republican candidate for their comments about how, rape was a gift from God and all that sort of thing. Those guys were extreme then. Their positions are now in the mainstream. And it's really, really, really incumbent upon Democrats to not let this election turn into a referendum, but to make it a choice every day of the week. And we haven't successfully done that yet, or turned that corner, but that is our chance. That's our shot with governor's races, with Senate races. It's a little harder with House races, which tend to be tied a little bit more to the national atmosphere.
So the backstory about that is the undoing of Todd Aiken and the undoing of Richard Lugar was the hand of Bradley Baychak and American Bridge. They actually got the tape when Aiken said that on some Sunday morning right-wing Christian radio show. And they also got the records that Lugar didn't have a place in Indiana, which, of course, caused him to lose the primary and elect Joe Donnelly, who's now the current ambassador to the Vatican. But at any rate,
well, no, Oppo does matter, and it changes these races. And keep in mind, like, there is this sort of fatalist view sometimes in the Democratic Party that just because a state is red now, that it's going to be red forever. But we should not write off the reddest states. We've seen that in recent years in Indiana, in Alabama. Obviously, that was sort of a weird situation. But in Missouri, Democrats could go, nominate someone like Eric Greitens. And Eric Greitens makes Josh Hawley look like he's Jack Danforth.
Republicans could nominate Greitens.
Republicans. Sorry, yes, I misspoke. And we could have a repeat of the situation, I think, when Republicans were nominating people like Christine O'Donnell in Delaware. So the Senate Republicans' recruiting efforts have been have given us a bit of a gift in the midterms.
So you're now in Indianapolis. That didn't look like a beat party to me. There's some pretty good candidates. They're probably not going to win, but there was some real enthusiasm, I thought, in that crowd, and pretty big. So I want to ask your opinion about one person, Joe Burrow.
Oh my! Well, I'm wearing a Bengals t-shirt right now. I want to thank you for sending him to the Bengals from LSU. I think he is one hell of a quarterback, but also a leader in a few different ways. He's really led what has historically been a ragtag team, to victory, almost victory, but he led them to the Super Bowl, which I count as a massive victory because no one was predicting that. But I've been surprised as well that he has shown, some conscience and been willing to speak out on hot button issues like a woman's right to choose, like gun control. And that takes a lot of courage to do because, a lot of NFL fans, and I've been to a lot of Bengals fans, it doesn't strike me as a particularly progressive crowd. No. But, and he's someone who's given back to his community a lot. He's fought against childhood hunger. And I would love to see more people like him in the NFL.
Well, before I turn it back, I would like to see more people like you in politics. And I think that you and Joe Burrow have a really important quality in a competitor. You don't spend time in the rearview mirror. When Joe Burrow is the most dangerous, if you look at when he was sacked in the Fiesta Bowl, the 2019 Fiesta Bowl, you'll see what he is. And I really followed you and talked to people about you. Obviously, I've read about you. And, you just keep that don't give a shit, plow ahead, win, beat the crap out of them attitude that you have now. Just don't lose that edge and don't let them get you down. Just stay focused.
I would. Yeah, I think that's true. But you've also got to, and I write very frankly about this in my book, is don't dwell on your mistakes, but learn from them. That's something I try to do every day. And I think that everyone should do in politics, which is not let them define you, but don't repeat them in the future.
It's a good idea. Good idea. Well, I really can't thank you enough. And I'm going to put that little dinner together in Manhattan and we'll get drunk and tell lies.
Great.
Okay.
And thank you, James. I mean, I really do mean it. That watching you as a kid, that was sort of what got me into politics and got me here. So it's an honor to speak with you and also with you today, Al.
Okay, the book is Any Given Tuesday, a political love story. Lis Smith, thank you so much for being with us.
Great, thank you.
Go Joe Burrow. Okay, thank you.
Hey, James, lately I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and books, and it's been great. One reason it's been great, to listen to because using Raycon wireless earbuds to do it. Raycon's everyday earbuds look, feel, and sound better than ever, and with optimized gel tips for the perfect in-ear fit. These earbuds are so comfortable, plus they will not budge, trust me. Raycons give you 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. Raycons are priced just right. You get quality audio at half the price of other premium audio brands. It's no wonder Raycon's everyday earbuds have over 50,000 five-star reviews. 50,000 five-star reviews. Not only do you get noise isolation, but you can put them in awareness mode for when you're multitasking or on the move. And with 3 customizable sound profiles improving your sound, whether you want pure, balanced, or bass as the focus, you can maximize the experience or anything you listen to. I love mine when I'm traveling, which I just did, or taking a work call. And you know, James, you enjoy them on the runs, right?
Yeah, my daughters gave me this for my birthday. And of course, some age differential is pretty substantial between me and my children. And I generally have an aversion to these things because I can get them to work. And it was really, really, really simple. I mean, even if you're a technological klutz, as we definitely are, these things are, and you're right. A lot of these earbuds I get, they fall out your ear and everything else. These things are somehow or other, they must have gotten a ear scientist to design them because they really fit really well. So this is a terrific product. Really terrific.
Well, you will love them if you get them. Go to buyraycon.com/warroom today to get 15% off your Raycon orders. That's buyraycon.com/warroom to score 15% off. Buyraycon.com/warroom or look for the link in our show notes. All right, James, now we have our questions from such informed listeners. Boy, it is hard to pick out the 6 or 7 best questions because there's so many good ones. The first one comes from Jeff in St. Pete Beach, Florida, and he's talking about the Democrats. He said, our leadership is old. It's a gerontocracy, but we don't have very many that are better. What people would you choose to replace them in the Democratic Party? What young people should the Democrats be looking to, James?
Okay, thank you for this question because this is something I really want to talk about. There's a sense that, well, maybe Biden will have to run because the Democratic bench is really weak. That is decidedly not the case. They are more talented, and I think we talked about here in one of the future shows, to just go through the potential Democratic field. And there is, that class of 2018, there's so much talent in the Democratic House members, it's hard to comprehend. There's so much talent of potential presidential candidates. And I mean people with real political skill, with real fundraising powers, with real ability to attract attention. So I've never seen assuming that Biden decides not to run, I'm not even close have I ever seen a field as potentially talented as the Democratic field would be in 2024 in an open election. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be 78 in October, but if there's not some demographic churn in the party, and I mean real churn and real fast, the image of the party is so bad, and this is poll after poll after poll after poll after poll, right? One of the things that is stunning to people is how well we're doing in some of these trial heats because just how horrible their candidates are. And the party's being propped up, a lot of them by the small donor base. I mean, the contribution differential of small donors favoring the Democrats is something unheard of in American politics. But I'm telling you, if we don't have some quick generational churn in the Democratic Party, we're going to fall off the face of the earth.
Yeah, and it's not just at the White House level; it's at the congressional level too.
Right, and people that I really, I love President Biden. I love. I think Nancy Pelosi is, one of the greatest speakers that ever lived. I think Senator Schumer's a very aggressive guy. It's just, man, and you just hear it all over. I mean, people that do focus groups are just like, wow. Because
Well, let me give you
have to
another.
change.
And it's something that feeling also spills over to the other side. They have younger congressional leaders, by and large, with the exception of McConnell. But the poll in Iowa, where Chuck Grassley, who's been in politics for well over 50 years, is only running, a little more than a margin of error ahead of a new Democratic candidate, a retired admiral. And people basically out there think Chuck Grassley is too old. You know what, James? He's 89. They're right.
Of course it is. I don't know we need to look up what the law on third party candidates is, but a lot of people think it'd be smart for Democrats to get behind some libertarian candidates in places like Nevada, Arizona. And I don't know if it's possible in Iowa, but if you look at that Ansels poll, which we know is, probably the best poll you could imagine, there's a large undecided, but a lot of them would say neither a third party. I mean, they're not disengaged. I mean, it's abundantly clear that they don't want to vote for Grassley. It's equally abundantly clear that they don't want to vote for a Democrat. And my advice, and I've passed it on, is for him to run on physical energy and political moderation. Don't think you got to stimulate the base and come out for a bunch of goofy, progressive stuff, because the base is stimulated. And you just got to assure enough people that it's safe to vote for you, that you're not going to go with this San Francisco school board crap.
You're talking about Admiral Frankel.
Admiral Frankel, yes.
In Iowa.
He's got a real record and real deep roots.
And your colleague, Paul Begala, who knows a little bit about politics, says that's exactly what he's doing. So Iowa may be one of those real sleeper races to watch.
Paul's really involved in this. He's the one that put
the next question comes from Don. Don is an Air Force veteran in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And he said, it makes me nauseous, he says, to inquire, but should Joe Biden provide a Gerald Ford deal to Donald Trump? If he accepts the pardon, he has an implicit admission of guilt and would likely to be barred from running again. Don, I think it's probably a moot question. It's not that I don't think Trump may be indicted. He may well be indicted, but they'll stretch it out, I think, probably for at least a couple years. If in the unlikely event it's not a moot question, and it came to that, as one who was outraged when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, and then later came to see that it was a very wise and smart thing to do, as did some other people who were even more involved in outrage, like Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. If we came to that, I don't think we will, and you could get Trump to admit he was guilty and be denied from ever running for office, yeah, I'd go for that, but I don't think it's going to happen.
The problem with that is you got to get Georgia and New York State and other jurisdictions to go on it. It's just as likely he gets indicted, which a presidential pardon would do him no good, in a state-related case in Georgia or potentially New York. So that throws a wrench.
Particularly Georgia. The New York criminal thing it seems less likely, but Georgia, it is relevant.
Right.
Derek in Edmonton, Alberta, James, is interested in your views on the chances for Beto O'Rourke winning in Texas. With all that's happened nationally, Roe v. Wade, he says, and in the state, Uvalde, shouldn't this race be one where Democrats have a real shot?
Well, actually, I'll take a little bit of issue with you. It's weird because it should be one where Democrats really don't have a shot. We're in a by all historical standards, we're in a terrible cycle. I mean, the first election after we got presidential approval has traditionally been a good barometer of well a party does in the midterms. It's awful, and yet, for some reason, Beto is hanging in there pretty good, and he raised $27.5 million in a quarter. I don't know what that means, because no one knows what it means, because no one has ever seen anything like this. And people in Texas tell me he's a much improved candidate. Much improved. He's done what he has to do. He's learned from defeat. Now, you're going in Texas to decidedly Republican, not tilt, bend almost to it, and you're going in what most handicappers say is a terrible cycle for Democrats. Yet this weird stuff that's going on out there. So I don't know. It's a money question, And if somebody has a better answer than I just gave, I'm open to listen to it. But it is weird. But the small donor totals, and to some extent, the head to head when you do these guys head to head, you look at pollsters tell me all the time, James, if I looked at every question on this poll, but the head to head, I think Democrats get beat by 15, 20 points. Yet we're 3 points up. I don't know.
Yeah, he also another headwind down there is the voting restrictions they enacted. We don't know what the effect will be, but that Texas Republican Party, James, is as crazy as any Republican Party in the country. You know, he's running with a lieutenant governor who is to the right of Attila the Hun, and an attorney general who has been indicted in the state, and his former aides have gone to the federal prosecutors. So, you know, maybe I think Beto, if you're right, he's a much better candidate, and with that kind of money, look at Texas too.
Yeah, I don't know.
This next question, by the way, comes from Blair in Denton, Texas. Blair asks, what more does Merrick Garland need to bring charges against Trump? Trump still has a firm grip on the GOP, and from what I've seen so far, I don't think Garland has the balls to bring charges. Blair, that is very premature. They are doing, it appears to me from just what I read, they've gone after, they've raided John Eastman's home, or telephone, and the former, that fool who Trump tried to take over the Justice Department. I think there's more of an investigation going on than we realize. I think it's more serious than we realize. And I think in the end what he's going to do is what Andrew Weissman, a former really great prosecutor, one-time guest on this show, wrote last week, you want a hub and spoke indictment. It's not about January the 6th. It's about a whole series of efforts to overturn the democratic process. And it's not going to happen before the election. But I don't, Blair, I think you're too pessimistic. I don't think that Trump is out of Garland's grasp at this time. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'm going to straddle this question. I think, you know, it remains, it's an open question as to Garland really wanting to aggressively do this. But you're right, there is activity. And I mean, I think he's fully aware of this, and he should be. You touch a king, you kill a king. He's got to have a pretty ironclad case,
right,
to proceed with this.
Yeah, he not only has to get a conviction, he has to persuade at least some of the public that might worry about
it. It's got to be pretty.
It's not going to happen before next year, but Blair, don't dismiss it yet.
There's activity below the waterline.
Yeah. James Bowe in Santa Monica, California. Boy, what a fabulous place. Wants to know, have Democrats, you'll love this, have Democrats lost touch with reality and only try to cater to the very left, who doesn't seem to be looking at the big picture? And then as a secondary to that, he wants to know why more people aren't talking about nuclear power.
Well, let me do reverse order. If somebody talks to me about climate, and they're not talking about nuclear, you're not part of the conversation. I'm sorry. And one of the, Germans are thought of as to be a really kind of smart technological people. I suspect that reputation is justified. One of the dumbest things they did was shut down 6 nuclear plants. All right. And people have saying, we'll figure out the storage issues a long time before we figure out how to fill up the hole in the ozone layer, whatever we got. So as to, what was the first part of the question? I got jumped to myself.
The first part of the question was that have Democrats lost touch with reality and are catering too much to the left?
Only about the Pew polling, other polls, only about 10 to 15% of the party are like that. And they're overly defining the other 85%. And they keep doing stupid stuff, like faking handcuffs, and they're costing us. And the number of Republicans who are out and out nuts is 3 times of the number of Democrats who are out and out silly. So we get defined by our small silly faction more than they get defined by the maybe majority nuts faction, for all I know. And it's irritating. And, you can't, in the country, people have a right to free speech. But I just wish they would understand the staggering amount of damage that they're doing, and the damage they're doing in places like Iowa, the damage they're doing in places like Kansas, the damage they did in Virginia. It's unbelievable, and I don't even know if these people are even self-aware of how freaking unpopular they are. I don't know. People can't stand them.
Hey, James, next, Robin in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. I know that, not far from where I grew up. Says, Robin, I think it's a she, says if Biden were to announce that he was not going to run in 2024, wouldn't it allow other candidates to insert some excitement and energy into the Democratic Party, give voters a chance to become familiar with those candidates? Robin, you're absolutely right. I've come around to James's view. I don't think Biden is going to be the nominee in 2024. I don't think he's going to run again. He's not going to do anything before the midterms. He shouldn't, probably, but sometime shortly thereafter, I mean within a couple months, it would be much better if he were to announce that he is not going to run. I don't believe the lame duck rap is very real. I don't think it really affects much as far as Congress is concerned. And you're right, it would give voters a chance to look at those other candidates, which James has said often is a potentially much stronger and more impressive field than people seem to realize.
There's a sense that, well, if he's going to say that he's not running, of course, let me be clear. He is entertaining no thought about not running. He's completely said he is running. But you always have to account for the possibility of political reality here. And if he's going to do it, he's got to do it early so, all the candidates can get going. He might do a favor if he was going to do it later and just, have a starter's gun go off and when you get a lot of attention. I don't think it, Bill Clinton didn't announce, it was an entirely different world until October of 1991. You can do a lot of politicking in, a couple of 3 months, but I don't know, but it's, and boy, when you look at that Senate governor's map in 2024, you see how critical it is to have a kind of unified, enthusiastic party. It's essential. But you look at some of the numbers, I mean, the image of the Democratic Party is frankly for shit right now. And this is not based on a poll. This is based on multiple polls and focus groups.
James, I think October would be a little late because, among other things, if he doesn't run, Kamala is going to run, I'm sure. I don't think she's going to do very well. I don't think she's going to clear the field. But there's a little process, maybe May or June. But in any event,
maybe it'd be better. But I'm just saying you'd be surprised how fast people can move.
Hey, Jeff in Winfield, Kansas, wants to ask you, why aren't Democrats shouting from the mountaintop over and over again the threat to democracy the Republican Party poses? Every candidate for public office, from school board to the presidency, should be forced to disown in unambiguous terms Trump and supporters of the big lie.
I have no problem criticizing the press. None. All right? But they've done I don't know how much more they can do on the big lie. I mean, every time they write a story about this, they point to the fact that there's no evidence. I think that, points well taken. I think it's up to people. It's just got to come out. But I can't, in good conscience, I can't criticize the press for not bringing to light how big a lie this is. They've done a good job on that. They have not done a good job on blowing the horn on how significant this election in Kansas is. Not remotely a good job.
The latest, not that we need anything more, but a whole group of, I get 8 or 10 prominent conservatives, former Speaker Paul Ryan, 2 distinguished former Republican judges, former Senator Jack Danforth, Ted Olson, all came out saying there's absolutely no evidence of any significant fraud last time. So you're right, it's out there. Okay, keep those emails, keep those letters coming in because we love those questions. You're from all over the country, and wherever you are, you ask good questions. We love them. And if you're like us, you're always looking to make sustainable swaps in your home. Finding the things with no plastic wrap, no harmful chemicals, and hopefully nothing that involves chopping down trees. Luckily, there are more and more solutions available that we love using at home to help keep our earth beautiful also. That's why our new favorite sustainable swap is Real Paper. Real makes a sustainable toilet paper using fast-growing bamboo and is always shipped in plastic-free packaging, including the tape on the box. The great thing about bamboo is that it's a grass, and just like a lawn, it can be cut and regenerated without harming the plant or soil. So Real harvests the same plant over and over instead of cutting down trees. It's definitely preferable over the usual plastic-wrapped toilet paper using the conventional stuff that contributes to deforestation and habitat loss, all for something we use once, then flush down the toilet. It's a game changer, James Carville.
It's more than a game changer because, first of all, the importance to beat this climate thing, which I don't mean, come on, I'm not going to insult you. If you just look what's happening in Texas, or look what's happening in the United Kingdom, or look what's happening in Western Europe, or you don't need to what's happened in Central Asia. You're hardly so smart enough to know what it is. But one of the things you're going to have to do is you're going to have to beat it with 1,000 cuts. And this is something that most people don't sufficiently realize, and that is the importance that forests and swamps, okay, in places like this really act as a carbon sink, and they do a lot to absorb this. Of course, we're contracting it because we're stupid, and this is an unbelievable product, and they're going to have to use bamboo for more and more. And you're right, this stuff grows really fast, and you say the least, you're going to use toilet paper. I mean, it's not a minor thing, and I hope these guys can get a increasingly bigger share because they're doing the Lord's work here. I promise.
Well, Real Paper is available in easy, hassle-free subscriptions or for one-time purchases on their website. All orders are conveniently delivered to your door with a free shipping and 100% recyclable plastic-free packaging. If you head to realpaper.com/warroom and sign up for a subscription using our code WARROOM at checkout, you'll automatically get 30% off your first order and free shipping.
I wish I'd have thought of this. This is genius.
That's realpaper.com, REELPAPER.com/warroom, or enter promo code WARROOM to get 30% off your first order plus free shipping. So let's stop flushing our forests and give Real's tree-free paper a try. 0 trees, 0 plastics, and 0 compromises with Real. You also can find the link in our show notes. Hey, James, I feel a little bit guilty about this outrage, but Herschel Walker, the Donald Trump anointed candidate for the United States Senate in Georgia, has proven to be so unready for prime time, it almost seems cruel to point it out. Earlier, he talked about the 52 states in America, and he said the solution to school shootings is to create a department that, quote, looks at men, that looks at women, that looks at school media. I have no idea what that means. His latest was to criticize Democrats' environmental proposals because the result, he says, it would be China would send all its dirty air over here while taking all our clean air. His personal and professional lives are full of controversies. The Walker handlers are trying to keep his former football great under wraps, away from the press, because they're just scared to death as to what he's going to say. But as another great athlete, boxer Joe Louis, said, "You can run, but you can't hide, Herschel."
Well, let me say 5 words. United States Senator Tommy Tuberville, all right? What we know is you can be colossally stupid and ill-informed or misinformed or have any kind of crazy thing you want. And, if you run in the right cycle in the right place, you can win. Warnock, by the way, is turned out to be one of the more upside surprises in the Democratic Party. I think Reverend Warnock is a very viable presidential candidate at some point in his political career. He's a very skilled guy.
I agree with you, James, and Georgia ain't Alabama.
I know, but you get a bad enough year, anything it could happen. And as we know, stupidity is hardly a disqualifying trait to get Republicans to vote for you. They actually kind of like stupidity. I mean, not like it, they elevate it, they embellish it, they love it. The stupider you are, the better you do. And he's pretty stupid, let me tell you. He's really stupid. I mean, he's world class, but I don't know if he. I'd like to have a debate with him and Coach Tuberville. Ooh, man.
Any outrage, James?
I guess it's an outrage, and there's so many people to be outraged. But this Ohio, Indiana abortion story, and I'm sure everybody knows the facts of this. A 10-year-old in Ohio was raped, and the lawyers thought that there was some danger in performing the abortion in Ohio and less in Indiana. So that's what happens. It's a 10-year-old was raped. And the Indianapolis Star ran a story having a named source, a board-certified, highly trained OBGYN, I think is on the faculty of the University of Indiana Medical School. And, okay, so you had the usual shit. I mean, the Wall Street Journal editorial page and Tucker Carlson. Everybody jumped all over it saying it's not true, it's not whatever. And then you got these fact-check pontificators who just because they have so many Republican facts that are false, they look for anything on the Democratic side to criticize. So Glenn Kessler, who's obviously a very smart guy, writes a thing saying, well, it's not really proven, and it was sloppy journalism, and it's likely not true. Of course, the next day, they arrest the guy. And then they say, well, that's the Indianapolis Star's prerogative if they want to run a one-source story. Well, the one source was a pretty freaking good source who gave a name. She performed the procedure. And I think these guys are so shell-shocked because they just have to write so many times that Republicans lie that they're just looking for something to criticize Democrats for. And instead of saying, wow, did we get that wrong? No. I have journalistic standards. The Indianapolis Star does not. I guarantee you the Washington Post or anybody would have run that story based on the doctor that actually did the procedure, who gave her name, who was eminently qualified, and who would have everything to risk for being wrong about a story like this. So I color me unimpressed with the Washington Post fact check on this issue.
You are so colored, James. Hey, thanks for listening to Politics War Room with James Carville, and I'm Al Hunt. Don't forget to send your questions for us by email to politicswarroom@gmail.com or tweet them for next week's show @Politicon. Following this episode, we'd appreciate it if you'd check out the links to our sponsors, Miracle Brand, Raycon, and Real Paper in our show notes. We thank you for supporting them. When you do, it helps make this podcast happen. To keep up with us, subscribe on Politics War Room on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. Please rate the show with a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with another show as we continue our War Room planning.